When you spend enough time worrying about everything that could go wrong, you will eventually lose sight of everything God is making right. Worry has a way of magnifying your what-ifs and minimizing God's already done. It takes your eyes off the one who said, "Be still and know that I am God," Psalm 4:6-10. You think your worry is protecting you, preparing you, helping you manage the fear inside you, but all it's really doing is convincing you that you're the one who has to hold everything together. You're not. God never asked you to. And maybe that's the whole point. Because every time you find yourself spiraling in anxiety, God is whispering a reminder that He is still working behind the scenes. He doesn't sleep. He doesn't slip. He doesn't get overwhelmed. He doesn't get caught off guard. He doesn't check out when life gets chaotic. He is the same God who spoke the universe into existence, and that same God is working right now in ways you cannot see, orchestrating details you haven't even discovered yet, aligning answers to prayers you haven't even prayed yet, and fighting battles you didn't even know were coming. And yet worry convinces you that God isn't moving fast enough, that He isn't responding on your timeline, that He must not care because He isn't giving you the clarity you asked for. But what if God's silence isn't His absence? What if His timing isn't denial? What if every unanswered question in your life right now is actually God building a foundation strong enough to carry the blessing He's preparing to place on it? What if the thing you're worried about is the very thing God is working on the most? When Jesus said in Matthew 6:27, "Can any one of you by worrying add a single hour to your life?" He wasn't trying to shame you for being human. He was trying to free you from carrying something that was never meant to belong to you. Worry steals time. It steals peace. It steals perspective. But the deeper danger is that it steals alignment. When you're consumed by fear, you stop partnering with what God is doing and start fighting for control of what God already promised to handle. Think about the Israelites standing at the edge of the Red Sea. They thought they were stuck. They thought God brought them out only to let them die in the desert. But God said, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Exodus 14:14. Still doesn't mean passive. Still doesn't mean silent. Still means surrendered. Still means trusting that the God who brought you out is the same God who will bring you through. God split the sea, not because Moses worried, but because Moses obeyed. Your breakthrough is rarely connected to your worry, but it is always connected to your trust. There are moments when you think God is late, but He's actually moving pieces into place that you don't even know exist. You think the delay is a denial, but God is protecting you from walking into something before it's fully prepared. You think the closed door is rejection, but God is redirecting you toward a door that leads to destiny, not disaster. You think you're being overlooked, but God is setting you up. He's not ignoring you. He's arranging the right people, the right opportunities, the right timing. You're worried about what isn't happening. God is working on what is about to happen. And the enemy knows that if he can't destroy you, he will distract you. He will load your mind with scenarios that haven't happened, consequences that don't exist, outcomes that God never promised. He will make you fear a future that God has already secured. He will make you worry about battles that belong to the Lord. He will make you play movies of worst case endings when God has already written a different story. But hear this, worry is faith in the wrong direction. When you worry, you are imagining a future without God in it. You are projecting fear onto a place where God has committed His presence. You are rehearsing defeat in a place where God has already spoken victory. That's why Philippians 4:6-7 says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God." And then it says, the peace of God, the peace you've been trying to create on your own, the peace your anxiety has been stealing, the peace of God will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Some of you aren't sleeping. Not because life is too heavy, but because you are carrying what belongs to God. You're holding burdens you were never built to hold. You're trying to manage outcomes that only God can control. You're trying to fix people God hasn't assigned you to fix. You're trying to predict what God has already promised to provide. And every time you try to take God's role, you lose your rest, your rhythm, your clarity, your joy. But God is saying, cast your cares on me because I care for you, 1 Peter 5:7. Not because you're weak, not because you're incapable, but because you were never meant to function under a weight that only God's shoulders were designed to carry. You cast your cares not because you're giving up, but because you're giving it to the one who can do something about it. When you worry, you are meditating on your problem. When you pray, you are meditating on your promise. When you worry, you magnify the threat. When you pray, you magnify the one who triumphs over every threat. And the shift doesn't start when the situation changes. It starts when your focus changes. Some of you have been worried about your finances, but God is already making a way. Some of you are worried about your children, but God loves them even more than you do. Some of you are worried about the future, but God is already there. He stands outside of time. He sees the beginning and the end. He knows the chapter you're in and the chapter that's coming, and not a single part of your story surprises him. Look at Joseph. He was betrayed, rejected, misunderstood, falsely accused. Everything looked like it was falling apart, but God wasn't absent. He was working. Genesis 5:20 says, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, meaning the very thing Joseph could have worried about was the very thing God was using to position him for purpose. God doesn't waste pain. God doesn't waste seasons. God doesn't waste the nights you cried or the days you felt forgotten. He is weaving it all into something that will eventually make sense in a way worry never could. You may not see the evidence right now, but faith is the ability to trust that God is doing something even when you can't recognize anything. Faith is the choice to believe that behind every silence is strategy, behind every delay is development, behind every no is a better yes, behind every closed door is protection, behind every unanswered prayer is a God who is too wise to be early and too loving to be late. Worry will make you miss the blessings that are already happening. You're praying for strength, but God is giving it to you in ways you haven't labeled as strength. You're praying for clarity, but God is giving you opportunities to trust Him more deeply. You're praying for breakthrough, but the process you're in is preparing you to sustain the breakthrough once it arrives. God is working in the waiting. God is working in the uncertainty. God is working in the places that feel like nothing is happening. Seeds grow underground before they ever break the surface. Foundations are laid before the structure ever rises. The roots deepen before the branches ever spread. And God is doing something in you right now that is forming your faith, shaping your character, strengthening your endurance, and anchoring your heart so you won't collapse when the blessing shows up. Even in the chaos of life, God is not pacing the floors of heaven, wondering what to do with you. He's not confused. He's not nervous. He's not second-guessing His plan. He is working all things, every detail, every delay, every disappointment, together for your good, Romans 8:28. Not some things, not just the easy things, all things. And maybe the thing you're asking God to remove is the very thing He's using to reveal Himself to you. Maybe the thing you want Him to fix instantly is the thing He's using to grow you gradually. Maybe the thing you wish He would hurry up and change is the thing He's using to change you. Because God is not only working for you, He's working in you. And sometimes the miracle is not that the storm stops. Sometimes the miracle is that you learn how to sleep through it like Jesus did in Mark 4:38. Because when you know who's in the boat with you, the waves don't worry you anymore. When you know who holds your future, your fears lose their grip. When you know who is fighting for you, you stop fighting battles that aren't yours. Because the moment you recognize that God is working, even when everything around you feels like it's breaking, something shifts inside you. It doesn't mean the situation becomes easier. It means you become stronger. It doesn't mean the problem disappears. It means you start seeing purpose where there used to be panic. It doesn't mean you suddenly understand every detail. It means you trust the one who does. Worry wants you to believe that you are alone in the fight. Faith reminds you that God is with you in the fire, just like he was with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Daniel 3:25. They stood in a furnace 7 times hotter than anything they had ever faced, yet the flames that should have killed them couldn't even cling to them because God was working in the heat. And notice this, God didn't keep them out of the fire, he got in it with them. That's the assurance you have. God may not always keep you out of hard places, but he will always meet you inside them. And sometimes you think the fire is evidence that God has abandoned you, but the fire is actually the stage where God reveals that he never left. The miracle wasn't that the fire didn't exist. The miracle was that the fire couldn't do what it was designed to do. And the worry that's been trying to suffocate your faith is about to lose its power, not because you figured out how to solve everything, but because you finally realize God is in it with you. There are seasons when you feel like you're praying into silence. You're crying out, but nothing seems to shift. You're asking God for direction, and all you hear is the echo of your own questions. But silence is not absence. Silence is often preparation. God was silent for 400 years between the Old Testament and the New, but he was working the entire time, setting the stage for Jesus to enter the world at the perfect moment. Galatians 4:4 says, when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son. Not early, not late, perfect. The fullness of time is not your time. It is God's time. It is the moment when every piece aligns, every detail fits, every preparation completes, and the thing you've been praying for is finally strong enough to stand. If God gave you everything you asked for when you wanted it, you would step into blessings without the character to carry them. You would walk into opportunities without the wisdom to steward them. You would inherit things you are not yet equipped to sustain. So God works while you wait, and he strengthens you while you worry. But worry doesn't help the process. Trust does. Trust is not a feeling you wait for. It's a decision you choose. Trust is not ignoring the reality of the situation. It's inviting God into the reality of the situation. Trust is not pretending everything is fine. It's declaring that even when everything isn't fine, God is still faithful. Trust is not the absence of questions. It's the presence of surrender. Proverbs 3:5-6 tells you exactly what to do. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Leaning on your own understanding is exactly what produces worry. Leaning on God is what produces peace. Your understanding is limited. His wisdom is limitless. Your vision is narrow. His vision is eternal. Your perspective sees the problem today. His perspective sees the outcome 10 years from now. When you stop depending on your own understanding, worry loses its authority over your life. And sometimes the reason God hasn't revealed the next step is because you're still holding on too tightly to the last one. Worry grips what God is trying to shift. Fear clings to what God is trying to free you from. God cannot fill hands that are clenched around anxiety. He cannot bless what you refuse to release. He cannot multiply what you won't offer. But the moment you open your hands, even if they are shaking, even if your heart is racing, even if you are scared of what comes next, that is when heaven begins to work on your behalf. Think about Elijah on Mount Carmel. The drought had lasted years. People were desperate. Hope was fragile. Yet Elijah prayed for rain when there wasn't a cloud in sight. He sent his servant to look 6 times, and 6 times the servant came back with nothing. Not a drop of evidence, not a hint of a change, not a sign that God was doing anything. But Elijah didn't stop praying because he understood something that worry refuses to accept. The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. On the 7th time, the servant returned and said, I saw a cloud the size of a man's hand. 1 Kings 18:44. It wasn't big, it wasn't loud, but it was enough. And Elijah announced, There is a sound of heavy rain before a single drop touched the ground. That tiny cloud was proof that God had been working the entire time, even when the sky was empty. Worry looks at the empty sky and assumes God forgot. Faith looks at the empty sky and prepares for rain. God is not intimidated by how long you've been waiting. He is not worried about the odds. He is not nervous about the lack of evidence. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows how to bring rain out of clear skies, hope out of heartbreak, purpose out of pain, provision out of nowhere, blessings out of barren places. Your job is not to make it happen. Your job is to trust the one who already has it under his control. There are things you've been carrying for months, years, maybe even decades. You've worried yourself sick over outcomes that God already settled. You've lost sleep over scenarios that will never unfold. You've been trying so hard to predict what God has already planned. But Matthew 6:34 reminds you, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. God is already in your tomorrow. He is not asking you to manage it. He is asking you to trust him with it. You don't need to know how God is going to do it for him to be working on it. Your understanding is not a requirement for his intervention. Your clarity is not a prerequisite for his provision. God has performed his greatest miracles in the middle of confusion, uncertainty, and chaos. The disciples didn't understand how 5 loaves and 2 fish could feed thousands, but Jesus still multiplied it. Matthew 14:19. They didn't understand how Lazarus could live again, but Jesus still called him out of the grave. John 11:43. They didn't understand how a crucified Savior could redeem the world, but Jesus still rose on the 3rd day. God doesn't need your understanding. He needs your surrender. And there's something powerful God does when you finally stop rehearsing the worst case scenario and start declaring his promises over your situation. Worry says, what if it all falls apart? Faith says, what if God is building something stronger than before? Worry says, what if I fail? Faith says, what if God is using this to grow me? Worry says, what if nothing changes? Faith says, what if this is the moment everything begins to shift? Your mind may still try to worry, but your spirit knows the truth. God is working. He is working when you feel him and when you don't. He is working when you see progress and when you only see problems. He is working when the door opens and when the door stays closed. He is working when the answer is yes, when the answer is no, and when the answer is not yet. He is working in your tears, in your questions, in your confusion, in your exhaustion, in your waiting, in your wondering, in your silent prayers, in your midnight battles, and in every place you thought he had abandoned, but he hasn't, and he never will. So today, make the decision to stop letting worry write chapters God never authored. Lift your eyes from what's falling apart and fix them on the one who holds everything together. Lean into his promises even when you can't trace his hand. Trust his timing even when your heart is tired of waiting. Rest in his presence even when your mind wants to run in circles. Because the same God who brought you through every storm behind you is already working in the storms ahead of you. The same God who protected you before is preparing you now. The same God who made a way then is making a way again, right this moment, whether you see it or not. You do not have to fear what's next when God is already there. So breathe, release the weight you were never meant to carry. Step into the peace that Jesus promised and remind your heart that the God who works all things together for your good is still on the job. He has not paused. He has not stopped. He has not forgotten you. He is working with precision, with purpose, with love, with power, and with a plan far greater than the one you've been worried about. Stop worrying. God is working and he's not finished yet.